Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to get started. I'm Jennifer Gunn. I'm the director of the Institute for Advanced Study, and we're happy to have all of you here today. I want to start first by remembering that we are all residing on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of Indigenous peoples. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus is located on Dakhóta land, ceded in the treaties of 1837 and 1851. The Institute for Advanced Study acknowledges that this place has a complex and layered history. This land acknowledgement is one of the ways in which we work to educate the campus and community about the land and our relationships with it and each other. And the IAS is committed to ongoing efforts to recognize, support, and advocate for American Indian nations and peoples. Thank you all for coming. I want to make a few announcements first, and then I'll give you some Zoom instructions. So first, I want to remind people that if you are interested in a Humanities Without Walls Grand Research Challenge grant, there will be an information session this afternoon on Zoom from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. And I also encourage you to register and attend a special presidential event with National Book Award winning poet Nikki Finney from 5 to 6 this afternoon. We are, and one final announcement for graduate students who are interested in the human in the data. MnDrive Summer Fellowships. Those applications are due next week, and there's more information on the IAS website. So I want to welcome all of you and to say that we're doing this a little differently than we normally do a big event. We have a lot of people here today, and normally we would do this as a webinar, but we want you all to be able to enter fully into the discussion after the presentation. And so we'll ask you to mute yourselves and to at the time after the presentation to raise your hands, and you will come up in order, and then you will call on you to unmute yourself. If you want to ask a question, but you don't want to be identified, because I failed to say this event is being recorded. And if you ask a question yourself during the Q&A portion, you will also be recorded. So if you want to be anonymous, you may instead enter your full question into the chat, and I will read it to the moderator, to the panelists for you afterwards. And we are going to ask to hold questions till the end of the panel presentation, and then we'll call on you. So, yeah. So if everybody could mute themselves, that would be great. And I'll go ahead and get our panel started. We may be we're having technical problems for one of the panelists, so we may be a little slow, but on that. It's my great pleasure to introduce Chris Pexa. Chris is the author of Translated Nation, Rewriting the Dakhóta Oyáte, and he's an enrolled member of the Spirit Lake Nation and faculty in American Indian Studies here at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. He's currently working on a new project that remaps Ochéti Šakówiŋ places and place names through oral histories and other kinds of archival resources. And I'll now turn the panel over to Chris. Thank you so much.
Wopida Jennifer. Haumi dakupi, chante washte, nape chuzapido, dayan yahipi. Chris Pexa emak yapido, de wakanton Dakhóta, Dakhóta Oyáte ga Polish Irish Oyáte imata ho. Thank you, Jennifer, for the kind introduction. Hello, all my relatives. It's good to sort of see so many of you here this morning. I take your hands with a good heart, and I'm glad you're all here in this virtual gathering. My name is Chris, as Jennifer mentioned, and I'm Berewa Kanto on Dakhóta from Taopi's band and Polish Irish from Spirit Lake Nation in what's now called North Dakota. I'm an assistant professor in the American Indian Studies Department at the U of M here in the Twin Cities, where I'm also affiliated with the Race, Indigeneity, Gender, and Sexuality Initiative. I want to thank Jennifer Gunn, all the IAS folks, Lori Manning, and Lori Moberg, Brianna Manning, I can't read my own writing, I'm sorry, and I should know the names, and Abby Travis for all of the work in putting this event together today. With more than one speaker, I know it sort of becomes exponentially more difficult to corral these cats. So I appreciate all of that. Before I give a brief overview of my book, Translated Nation, I wanted to introduce the two other participants in today's gathering. One of whom is making his way here electronically. He had computer difficulties, but hopefully he can join us. Otherwise, it'll be a real short show. No, we'll carry on regardless, but we hope Jim is going to make it. I'm very grateful to my friends and relatives, Jim Rock and Waŋblí, Mayášleča, Francis Yellow, to have been able to join me here today to talk about matters of the Ochéti Šakówiŋ Oyáte, the people of the 7 council fires, our people, whose homelands we find ourselves on today, if you happen to be anywhere in the upper Midwest, pretty much in Minnesota, certainly, and in the Dakotas. Since the book I wrote grew out of many voices, so I wanted to sort of explain why this isn't sort of a single author kind of book talky event. The book I wrote grew out of many voices, the voices of ancestors from 100 years ago, of literary ancestors of the 20th century, and of oral histories from more immediate relatives, from grandmas whose lives carried them into our century now. Because this rich chorus joined my own voice as I tried to tell a story about how the people continues in everyday places, activities, and stories, I wanted voices other and in so many ways more than my own to be here today as well. And here are a couple of really amazing voices and people. I'll introduce Jim. Oh, he just made it. Good. Očhéti. I don't see, but I take it on faith. Jim Rock, I first met at the ancestor mounds above the bluff overlooking Chachawakpa, Ishwakpatanka, the Mississippi River here in St. Paul. I was part of a group of scholars from the University of Mississippi, Northwestern University, University of Iowa, and University of Minnesota. We were all gathered together through a Mellon grant that would study indigenous art and activism along the Mississippi River. Kelly Weiskup was the grant writer and from Northwestern University, and she remains our fearless leader still, though our regrouping has been postponed by the virus. For the better part of an afternoon, we listened to Jim and rode his bullet train of a brain as he discussed the mounds, you'll see what I mean, and their connections to birthing caves below the mounds, at the sacred site of Wakantipi, and to Dakhóta concepts of birth, death, and Chankuwanakiku, the Milky Way, or Spirit Road. As Jim moved us vertically from the water realms of the Očhéti, the water beings, from caves and rivers and amniotic fluids of Maka'ina, Earth Mother, and of our human mothers, to the stars, my heart was moved by how these relationships of intergenerational honoring and care, he described, were so powerfully present there in that park. This is Indian Mounds Park, so-called. Even in spite of so many of the mounds having been destroyed in acts of destructive so-called research and recreation. I have some slides, I should pull them up. Oops, you don't want to see my email. So I don't know if you can all see this. Hopefully you can. Let me go to, this is a photograph, this is from the Minnesota Historical Society archive, of the mounds in, I believe this is the early 1900s. I didn't get the date exact, but this shows, you can see a kind of spiral pathway leading up to the top of the mound where people are recreating with, parasols and bowler hats. And this is one of the few mounds that still remains. Many more were excavated out of existence. This is something Jim can discuss maybe when he's on. When I was teaching a course about a year later on literature and public life at the U of M, I asked Jim to come back and talk to my class. My mother happened to be visiting that day from out of town. She lives in Tucson, Arizona now, where it was much warmer than it was here on that day. And I asked her to come along on the mounds outing. Cold or chilly as it was that day. My mother is over here. She looks like one of the students, sort of same height as many of them. She would really not forgive me if she heard me say that, so I'm sorry. It was wonderful to see Jim anyway connect the return of to the mother mounds here, and to the Wakantipi, the cave, the birthing cave below, with the return of my own mother, and how we could all come back to that Chakpa, the navel, when we came to that place. So I'm honored that Jim is here with us today. I first met Waŋblí Mayášleča, Francis Yellow, at the Owamini Festival. He might not remember this, but that my cousin Denise Nelson organizes every summer. He might not remember, not because he's a bad memory or something, but because I was just one of many people passing through. He was sitting at a booth drawing, and my kids sat down to draw with him. He described how Lakota and Dakhóta people didn't have to draw realistically to convey meaning or beauty, and how you could really get to know something about a person, whether that person was two-legged, plant, rock, winged, four-legged, or spirit, by drawing them. And it was through his paintings then that I saw the truth of that way of knowing. This is a painting that's in a work of ledger art, rather, that's in, and painting that's in the MIA here collection, and its title is Minnesota Nice Oyáte Pelo. And I just learned something from Francis before we all convened about what Oyáte means, and maybe I should let him tell you about it after I get done with my part. But it basically means a kind of something that is to be regarded with, how did you put it, Francis? Not entirely credible. It's not entirely credible. So this is an amazing piece, though, and I also know Francis, though, apart from his work as an artist, and he'll say more about that. I know in that term and what it means to him. I also know him through ceremony, right? Through Inipi, as a ceremonial specialist, a spiritual specialist, a practitioner, a caretaker of Dakhóta and Lakjóta Wičaÿčala, or tradition. I know him also as a boarding school survivor, a poet, a philosopher, whose visit to my class a couple of years ago left students deeply impressed by his incredible life, aliveness, and hope, but also deeply troubled by his reciting of the history of settler colonialism and genocide in this Dakhóta Makoche, these Dakhóta lands. Finally, I want to remember about Francis that before COVID, I really enjoyed our visits, and how we would go get coffee by a park, or in a park near his house, near the university. And even as lightning was crashing down all around us one time, and our metal picnic table, it was, if not completely enjoyable, certainly instructive for me at that moment. I was terrified. I'm terrified of lightning. And it guided me back to those original instructions, as Francis would remind me, to be a good relative, even if I didn't 100% believe that lightning, as one of our earliest relatives, never really wanted to harm us. Okay, so I want to stop speaking for a moment before I give a sort of fuller introduction of the book itself, to step aside and let Jim and Waŋblí Mayášleča speak and introduce themselves per our protocols. I don't know who would like to go first. How, Jim? Francis, it looks like Jim's kind of just getting settled in. Would you want to introduce yourself?
There. Greetings, my relative. My Lakota name, my Waŋblí Mayášleča, comes from dreams that I've been given. And it's, I've had other names, my ancestors' names, my younger days. So now that I'm an old man, Dakhóta Oyáte, I took that name. And I named myself, I should say. It's a new name, you could say. But because it comes from those dreams, the spotted eagle, Waŋblí Tanka, actually. Spotted eagle is a young eagle. Waŋblí Tanka is a full-grown golden eagle. That's what my name refers to. And Mayášleča is hill coyote. I dreamt about them. And you see there are a lot of names like that among our people. They seem to combine a lot of times a really different nation, bird nation, maybe like I've heard dog eagle. That's one name that's similar to mine. So, and I use that rather than using a title, you know, like an artist. I've been doing that for a long time. The last time I was asked to sign an artist contract, I said, I don't, you know, I had to explain, I don't consider myself to be an artist. I work from my ancestors' life way. It's not the same thing. It looks like art, I guess. I use modern art materials and all that, but the thinking, the heart of it, the spirit of it is Ochéti Šakówiŋ, Dakhóta, Nakhóta, Lakjóta thinking. And that's essentially Dakhóta Oyáte. All my relations, it's an expression of relatedness. We say it in first person because we say that two-leggeds are the only ones that forget their original instruction. So saying it like that, you remember it has a greater meaning. You acknowledge your kinship with all of life. That's not just among two-leggeds or human beings. All of life, everything seen and unseen. The unseen part is where modern knowledge, Western knowledge, science is just barely catching up to us. The way of science has been materialism, you know. If you can't see it, it doesn't exist, so it's not worth studying. I guess they leave that to the soft sciences, you know. But our way of knowing is there's no specialization of knowledge. So it doesn't make sense to call myself an artist, you know, and I do all kinds of things. And calling myself Wičaƴčala, colloquially, it's old man. And the people don't like that, you know, old people don't like that, you know, you call Okan, those terms, you know. I mean, that's a modern influence on the people. But it actually means full flowering man, or Minúchala, full flowering woman. That puts a different meaning to old age. And this being a youth worshiping society that they don't have much regard for elders. And the times we're in, everything's being shaken. We're in a transition period. Truth is revealing itself, which is to say, life is revealing itself. Life's power is revealing itself. So all these troubles we see, of course, are of our own making. Two-legged have created all these existential threats. And we see now with the pandemic that that's taken everything we got. You don't see those things looming around us. You can see how our government has failed to take care of the people. So it's one of those times where you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what to expect. Everything you used to know may not hold true anymore. So our ways kind of acknowledge that power of life. In our way of knowing life is power. Wichoni Wakanyula. And Wakanki Daku Wakan. The different kinds of power within any power. And then Daku Shkanka, that power moves. Life's power moves, life moves, and it doesn't stay still. But this modern way of life is trying to control that, to make life stand still. That's not a healthy thing. And power always reveals itself, so that's what we're seeing. Life in what they call climate change. A climate, you could say, is Dakhóta Oyáte, 4 directions. They're living beings, they're not abstractions. They're alive, just like water is alive, Mother Earth is alive, Father Sky is alive. Everything's alive. Everything is as alive as we are, and maybe more so, because human beings are the babies of the family of life. And of course, it says a lot about how crazy the times are we live in. The babies of the family of life are running the show. With spoiled children. So that's this way I'm explaining things, we tell stories, we hardly ever stick to the subject. But everything being related, it always comes back to whatever it is you're talking about. So in our way of knowing, we know that we don't know anything. My elders are like that. Any question I'd ask them, and I suppose it has to be a good question too. Good questions are hard to ask. I mean, hard to answer. So when you know that I don't know anything, that's a humbling thing. And that's how we know anything. In modern society, humility is more of a weakness than a virtue. But for us, that's our source of kinship, which is to say, our connection to love. Life is loving. We know that. We've forgotten that owing to the genocide we live under, but our ancestors foresaw these things the way we think. Think of the future generation, whatever you're doing. So they thought of us and they took our lifeways underground when the genocide was hitting them full force. They had to practice our lifeway, our ceremonies in secret. And of course, genocide means to destroy a people. And it's the definition of it, the legal definition, which is a modern one, says to destroy any people or group in whole or in part. So ethnicities, or what they call LGBTQI nowadays, all of those. Marginalized, vulnerable populations are genocided. And of course, I can say that because I studied that law, and I also know our law, original law, the law of relatedness. When people make these land acknowledgements that we're living on stolen Dakhóta land or occupied Dakhóta land, what they mean is we're standing on broken treaty, because you can't steal Mother Earth. We never owned her. That's our mother. Inamaka, Unchimaka. It's a stupid idea to think we'd ever sell any part of Mother Earth. Those treaties aren't about land ownership or land title transfer. So that's something that these land acknowledgements have to understand. If there's any such thing as democracy, the United States of America, they have to uphold their own laws, their own constitution. And the Constitution says that treaty shall be the supreme law of the land. Of course, we see in modern times that the United States breaks treaties unilaterally and isn't held to account because it's a nuclear armed state. Not to mention having the largest standing military in the world, military bases all over the world. But that doesn't stop us from upholding our end of the treaty. We have our own understanding of it. The written version of it is for the immigrant settler for them to remember what this was about. But because those treaties were edited, changed unilaterally in the process of ratifying them, they don't tell the truth. But the way we do through the way we made that treaty, we didn't write anything down. We didn't need to. We have a long, long history of making treaties. All the original nations here in Turtle Island made treaties with each other. So that treaty is, we made that through the pipe. We say we do everything through the pipe. So when we did that, our ancestors gave their word, and that really meant something then. Nowadays, you know, a written contract doesn't mean anything. That was a sacred thing to them. And of course, nowadays, nothing is sacred. It's a meaningless word. The word wakam, by the way, is translated to mean sacred, but it actually means power. And I suppose you could say power is sacred. If you're ever faced with it, confront it like a thunderstorm, you see that power, you feel it, you're in awe of it. You might be shaking in your boots in the face of it. That's real power. You respect that. So these land acknowledgements, I'm glad they're doing them because it opens up. It opens the way for the truth, what those treaties mean. Now there's land back movement, they call it. I think that's what they originally called anti-colonialism or decolonization. Yeah. Those treaties are about sharing the land. You know, there's enough for everybody. We didn't consider the immigrants, when they first came, we didn't consider them to be enemies. We welcomed them. Just about every story of contact, you hear that. How welcoming the original people were. Befriending these strangers. They didn't seem to know how to live. Couldn't feed themselves. They're afraid of everything. So we taught them. Our ancestors are generous people, that law of relatedness commands it. Life is generous. Life gives of itself freely. So that's a gift economy. That's what we practiced, our ancestors. We still do, as poor as we are, like this, just talking here now, relating our knowledge. That's sharing, that's generosity. And in our way, they say the greatest gift is when you don't expect anything back. That's how our ancestors were. There's other lesser forms of giving, but that was it. They shared more than just food or material things. They taught them, we're teaching them how to live. That's what our life ways teach us, yeah. How to live with our relatives. That's a That's an education in itself. And my elders would say, in light of genocide, they'd say, if you remember just one thing, we'll survive as a people. If we remember one thing. That one thing is Dakhóta Oyáte, all my relations. I can see how that's true, how that just that little bit of knowledge will take you everywhere. Whatever you need to know, it will connect you to it. Because everything's related. Nothing is unrelated. Everything matters in a sense. Everything's important. We all take part in life. We all contribute to it. And of course, life requires sacrifice. That's how everything got made. So the kinds of things we do on behalf of our people. The way I grew up in so-called boarding school, I was so dehumanized for most of my life. Until very recently, I thought I was irredeemable. My wounds are so deep, nothing could fix me. But our life way gave me a way to struggle and to call on life to help me. I couldn't find help anywhere, you know, counseling or Western medicine, or none of that. There's such deep denial in this country. Trying to get help, you have to explain everything to them. They don't understand the way we think. So if we talk to spirits or hear voices or animals, plants talk to us, we're crazy, you know. But those are human powers. Our life ways help us to realize our humanity. To be what we're made to be, that's our original instruction. Po, live. Be what you're made to be, kinship with all of life. That's really beautiful in comparison to what I was, those 10 commandments that were beaten into me as a child. It's open, it's just wide open. There's no one way of to be or one way of anything. I've been going on and on. I didn't notice the time, so maybe I should let somebody else talk.
Washtero, Dakhóta.
Oh. I've
Jim,
been looking for Tahanshi Jim, but did he finally connect?
I thought I saw him. Jim, are you there?
Oh, wana.
Oh,
Dakhóta.
Ampetu waste mitake api chante waste na hana pechu yusapido Waŋblí hanyetu himaki apido Ochéti Šakówiŋ Oyáte himata iminijaska imachare. All my relatives I apologize. I have never had so many trouble with the ones and zeros. And I really am so grateful, Tahanshi, for Wičaÿčala Nina Washtaedo, your beautiful words. Calm me, help ground me during this time when, you know, we go too fast. And that's the problem, is everything you said is, you know, Wowichake, Tanka, large, big truth that you give, because the adrenaline, like we're in a fight constantly. My father went to boarding school too, and my wife is a 5th generation boarding school survivor. Her people had 5 or was it 6 waves of the smallpox and other epidemics. So when you're speaking, we are sadly very familiar with always feeling like we're doing this dance that is not our dance. We gotta stay on our tiptoes. We gotta look 360, 24/7, which means no sleep. There's no downtime, no rest. The good chemicals, they call that the oxytocin. When the mother and the baby have the umbilical cord, and after that good connection, that's what we seek. And that's what you gave us today. And nephew Chris, Chantetan Wopita Tanka, for your beautiful words too, and introducing. I've been so looking forward to this opportunity, and I'm so grateful that, you know, yeah, they may call us artist or scholar or, you know, author, or, but we are our mother's children, our father's children. We are the Takhótas of Takhótas. And we need to stay like that, because they're the Wakáheja, they're the young ones that come in from that power place. Yeah, Wakang, the sacred, but the power, because as Lecture Albert Whitehat shared with me too, he said that word, it come with creation and destruction. It's both. And that way you have the power. Which way are you going to go? It's Jedi or Sith, you know. So that's why we like Baby Yoda, I guess. So anyway, so I have some image to show you. This first one is pretty new. This is the logo for organization I'm on the governing council for with Dr. Waziatawin. This is Makoche Ikikchupi. This organization is so that we can come home. We can feel the mother umbilical connection again to Inamaka. And that is by building traditional earth lodge, I call starchitecture. Because if we are from the Ochéti Šakówiŋ Oyáte, the 7 Starfire Nation, as I said, sorry, I didn't, Washichu, Shni, I didn't put it in English when I said what I did. I said I'm of the 7 Starfire peoples. My ate was Sisitoan, Wachpetuan, Dakhóta. And so I was born at Imenija I said, and that's where the water comes out of the little white sand at Wakantipi, at what's today Indian Mound Park. And so I was always taught that there's a star up there that connects us to this cave right here. So various different elders, and I could tell you which ones, at what time, which places. It's like a slow reveal, because it's a slow heal. As my elders saw that, well, we really, we should be doing this, but we'll do it in secret. Then say, okay, more and more of us were doing this in secret, and slowly people would help to get the Washichu laws to change. So by 1978 through the 70s, we remember the time we had to be very careful and quiet and go back home, out to places. We couldn't do it in the cities. For those of us who kind of grew up both back out on the reservation and in the cities. But then by 78, we had this freedom of religion, but it didn't really have enough teeth in the law. So my dad and I and people like Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, others that got the more 100,000 signatures, so we could have directly those ways that we could practice with the medicines, build the initipis, sing those songs again, and all that trauma that my dad felt since age 12 when he was separated from his kunshi and went to boarding school, and they told him, don't think that way, don't speak that way, don't be anything about that. That's exact opposite of what Tahanshi was just sharing here, was just be who you are. And he's like, no, don't be that. So how more 180 can you get? And so my dad would become, and he's in the star world right now. So I say this only with his strength, because otherwise it's too hard. But I'm so proud and humbled, pleased, happy that he didn't put that away forever. He got close to grandma more and more every day. And when he finally went back to the stars, he had one eye, one lung, no esophagus. He survived 2 kinds of cancers. He quit smoking. He had about 37 years sobriety. All those ways made him so loving that's how I saw him overcome. It was like he was always in the sweat lodge and always coming out like the fresh baby with new love, new connection with the chekpa, umbilical cord. And that's how he lived. He was just always smiling, but I know he had pain in there. He put on a smile anyway. And then he would always offer people his hand in a strong, good way. Look them in the eye, be glad for whoever they were, all colors, all languages, all places. And so the privilege of being able to share that at Wakantipi and Indian Mounds Park, I have to get natural about it. If I stay in that academic kind of my left brain, too much math science, too many numbers, I apologize, because my cousin already said it all. So the day that Chris was there, I love your phrase, the bullet train. I know when it's cold, when we have short time, when the cameras are rolling, and I have my wheelie wagon, and I put some special things in the wheelie wagon. I might have, my chante, my harp, my drum, chanchaga, but I also have my relatives. The little kids see that as stuffed animals, but those are the relatives. You have the turtle and the buffalo, and so when I'm referring to the stars in the sky, if it's day or night, they can hold that warm fuzzy. They feel that connection. And we were in a circle. And so I said, just imagine the circle of stars up there. So anyway, this organization behind me is for the 7 stars that we are, the 4 Dakhótas, 2 Nakhótas, and Lakjótas. And they say that we all began here. And when I got to be in the teepee with my ate and with Lexi, Albert Whitehat, it was just the 2 of them. I was the little mouse. I set up the teepee and I got to just sit in. Big joke. They said, go sit in the corner, Chinchi. In no corner, right? But and so I did. What a privilege. 2 ears, little mouse listening. And they spoke L only, D only. The way their mothers and grandmothers talked to them. And it was this beautiful love privilege to hear words, some very same, some very different. Like we say, Doke ja onhe. And then you say, Donik tukahuo. How are you? Well, that's 500 miles and maybe 500 years later. But we knew, start with the do and end with the he or huo. And then we laugh. We laugh because we know they were listening. The hunkaka, the ancestors were hearing us. And so I didn't ask any questions. What a privilege. There's so many questions I have now. And for my elders listening, and I get nervous and I see, but I hope after this crazy little 1-inch TV screen thing, we can be warm again. We can be in front of each other, 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 7 creatures, huh? 7-dimensional relatives in the spirit direction way. So with that, here's a couple more images that'll get me back to, all right, so here's our star map. One of the ways I helped my cousin, one of my cousins to represent this. We were very hesitant. First, we saw our Dakhóta cousins out at Sintegleshka and in those books. And a lot of us were afraid to record these images. And that's where, when Tahanshi Francis says, you know, we're really not artists. Well, no, but if we put these images on a way that can be saved, the buffalo hides or carvings, the petroglyphs, they're in the dances, they're in the pottery, they're in our regalia, the beadwork, the quill work before that. But now they're in 1s and 0s on computers. And this makes me nervous because it made my dad nervous, and I'm trying to get comfortable. But I have to tell you, every possible barrier and hurdle, just when I think this is okay, it's going to work. I've been at this almost 30 years now, trying with these computers. I'm humbly saying I'm pretty okay with this technology, but the technology, the spirits are not, let me say that way. Sometimes they really still say, pull that plug, doesn't work. That's what happened this morning. So I'm very hesitantly hopeful. I'll show you a couple more images, and if they don't work, you'll understand. So when we go into that cave, it's the star in that, you see the red circle down there, that's the racetrack, and that's the buffalo. And there's a snake below that red circle with the buffalo. I'll have to pull up a PowerPoint for that, but when you go in the cave, we can actually go in there now, but my mother, we would go in there. We would not go in there. It was too powerful, too sacred, too special. Some of the Washichu kids, they would force their way in there. You know, over many years, the stones would fall down, the entry would close, and that's as it should have been. That's like when your PowerPoints don't work today, when the Zoom passwords and the connections and the phone links and the satellites, the Spirit's way still have that way of shutting that door. So I hesitantly open this for you because I know many of you understand we put out the tobacco and we ask permission. Otherwise, none of this is, it's not for me, it's for us, it's for all of our people so we may live again in a good way. So I'm humbly grateful that what I learned from my dad, he learned from his grandma. She lived to be 8 days short of 100. And so I'll tell you a little about, I never got to see these 4 snakes drawn the way they were, because this was dynamited by the railroad empire builder, James J. Hill, whose bank has that number 1 on the top of it, First National Bank. They drained the swamp. That's all they saw. They didn't see a wetland full of all our relatives from the Ahadeshka and the Kea, the salamander, the turtles. They were still there when I grew up, but here's my ate. And so his name, Tabado Kasapa, Itokab Najin Shni. Buffalo black in front of Stand Not. Talk like Yoda we do. So I love that. And so when we say Takui Chanchpi and Yakupi, the stuff of stars we are. We come from the stars, and to the stars we return. We come from the earth, to the earth we return. Star stuff are us. And what kind of star stuff are we? Well, we're bison star stuff. We're the buffalo people. And so those 3 stars you see as, or some people see as Orion's belt. That's my dad's backbone. Those 3 stars, I mean that. You eat the buffalo, you are the buffalo, we live in the buffalo. Buffalo give us his skin, bones, every part, the horns, our water cup. Those 3 stars are the buffalo backbone for the hump. And so This is what one of those, my D uncles said. Dekshi says, we come from a star, or we come from a cave, or we've always been here. So which one is true? And I just say, yes, all of those. Oasi and Yamani, they're all three right, are true. So how does that work? Well, right here. You see that? The three stars, the three teepee poles. And then when I hear out to my Lakota cousins, they say, yeah, those first three teepee poles are for the three stars. I say, yeah, we have that too. And that's where I got to hear Uncle Albert and Ate say, yes, we all started at the cave down by the river in what is today Badote, Minnesota, and the sacred lake, Badewakan, 100-mile north. And we lived in both the prairies and the forests and the wetlands, the lakes, and then we could go 500-mile west. And over time, when the horses, we stayed out there. So here's another painting from my cousin, Annette Lee. And I love this because it's the 4 stars of the Big Dipper and the Towing or Tuwing. Tung is like the root of Tumpi or birth. To is like the blue-green. So some say she's the blue-green birth auntie woman because that sound, the O or the U, and the the nasal, and the woman, wing. And when my daughter was giving birth to my Takoja, our Takoja, I said, this is the way your great-great-grandmas would have said. You hang on to the teepee rope. You sing, you pray. It's painful, but there's going to be great joy. And you trust Wakantanka, Takushkanshkan, the great energy, the breath of life, Wichoni, the Nia, Onia, Onia, Nia, King, breathing in, breathing out, breath of life. Because she was the doula, she was Wakhpe Wian, the herbalist who delivered the babies, knew what to do, knew there's plant medicine stars. We have stars up there that are plants, not just animals. And this one is the blue birth auntie woman that helped the baby come in through the teepee, born into that, from that circle above to the circle cave below. So what is that cave below? It's the womb. And the water is the water of life. And above this cave, there should be 19 burial mounds. 19 burial mounds, but they're all gone now. Up the hill, 0.7 mile, should be 18 more burial mounds. There are only 6 left. So if you have 19 and 18, wow, that should have been so simple for me to see and understand. Why did it take until I was 40, 50, and now in my 60s? I guess the little gray or the snow, or the closer I get to going back home to those stars, it gets easier to feel the connection. So here's what they were telling me. The snake is the umbilical cord. Zuzetcha, Chekpa. And it's related to the Unktehi, the one that protects the water while we're in the water with our mother. And then the day of birth, that opening, we come out and we have that connection. How many days do we have the connection? 9 moons, 266 days. Our people were always scientists and mathematicians and engineers, and they knew these were the sacred numbers. I just had to put away the Washichu numbers and see it, feel it, our number way, and it makes sense. Let me show you. From my elbow to the tip of my finger right here, that's called Wichaÿczpa. Okay, so that's how my dad would say. And he would say when you get up, you know, hey, the 4 fingers. The sun is 4 fingers up. Why are you still in bed? You know, you're supposed to get up when the 4 fingers before the sun gets up. When you're a teenager, you don't want to hear that. So I would get up early, see the stars. That's when you can see the snake. And it's only a certain time of year, and that's now. So when the thunderbirds are sleeping, the snake's sleeping, and this is the place where they would sleep. They go into cracks in those rocks by the yellow rock down there. Then we can talk about that. My dad was very strict about the protocol there were some things he said, Grandma only told me once. She said, I can only tell you once. So listen, here comes one of those things. Listen deep, don't forget it. So I'm wearing some beadwork here, and it's the sun and the moon coming together, and there are 19 dangalies, okay? Do you know what that's saying? Because my family had the star connection too, the red day people that had to do the women with the Venus, morning star, evening star. They carried those ways on the women's side here. So it turns out Venus is 9 moons in the morning. You'll see it before the sun, 9 moons going down following the sun. But in between the morning and the evening, there's 2 times you don't see Venus. And if you add those days in, you get 584 days, 584. That's not a number we're taught much in the Očhéti way. That's a 1.6 years, more than a year and a half. But I thought Venus was closer to the sun than Maka'ina. Yeah, she is. She's a sister planet, closer. So she goes around the sun 13 times. She dances around like powwow. Wičaļčala akayamini, 13 times around. Just like the turtle shell has the 13 parts on the turtle shell, right? The turtle has the 3 in the middle and the 10 around. And so when Venus goes around 13 times, we dance 8 times. There's a relationship between the 8 and the 13. You look at the sunflower seeds, the spirals in the pine cones, the pineapple, the galaxies. Is this art or is it science and math? Answer is yes. So these beautiful visions that my cousin and the cousins in the, yeah, it's not just art. We're not just artists. It's sacred knowledge. And we better love that, because this tells me so much. The 19 dangalies here are for the 19 mounds above the cave. And that's 19 years. What happens in 19 years? That's, again, not something we're taught. What happens in 18 years? Something that's very much like 19, but then it also happens between 18 and 19. And I'm about ready to wrap it here. Thank you for the time. There's a number between 18 and 19. And so if you hold this one way, you get 9 on one side, 9 on the other, and 1 in the middle. So is that 9, 9, and 1? Is that 18 or 19? The answer is yes. Between 18 and 19. Why 18 mounds and 19 mounds? 18.61. They say, you guys didn't use decimal points. Okay, then let's just count days. 6,797 days, 6797. You mean we count days, 6,797 days? We did. In fact, we wrote the days into the snakes. These 4 snakes told me, I know time is short today, but they told me with the mounds where to look. They gave me the direction. So I'm going to be one of those Wheatgo guys. I'm just going to tell you, yeah, I used to hear the thunderbirds. Then I started hearing the snakes, and I realized I thought they were like, I was taught they were like, oh, kind of enemies of each other. No, they work together, but different time. The Wakias bring the water from above, and then the Untehis protect the water from below. And if we really want to understand, that's the kapemini. The kapemini is that teepee poles in a circle above and below. The star above by the Milky Way is the cave below by the river. Cave by river, star by Milky Way. And the teepee rope is the umbilical cord and the snake. You say, what? The snake? Yeah, aren't supposed to have fear? No, respect. Okay? So 14 miles away from these 2 mounds, draw them in a line. That's a very special line of where the sun and the moon line up. That's called an eclipse, right? When the moon gets in front of the sun, and we have all those stories of their relationship, all those creation stories. They're like husband, wife, but yeah, the rules kind of changed. Same about the 4 directions, the 4 wind brothers, these 4 snakes, but the directions changed. Our protocol, you got to really hear those old stories, but they wrote it in here. That's how I know what was written is way over 1,000 years, probably way over 2,000 years ago. And so what it told me was 14 miles away at an angle of 117 degrees. I know that sounds crazy. Sorry, this isn't the time to go into all that. There's a big snake mound, and that snake mound was almost 2 football fields long. 534 feet is what the Washichu man Lewis wrote in 1883. And I listened to that. I wrote about that. Finally, I said, wait, did we measure in feet? Siha? No, wichaÿčpa. Do you know how long that snake body is from the tail to the head? 266 wichaÿčpa. 266 cubits. What's 266? I told you earlier. 266 days that we are connected to Ina by the Chakpa. That's the birth number, the snake number, the Venus morning star 9 moon number, 266. And then from birth to death, the morning star quilt, 8 points. That's for 8 years. It takes Venus 8 years to come back because it's really Earth 8 years that's circling. All this is connected, everything connected. And so there's more. The head of the snake, the tail of the snake, they're longer than 266. When you do the math on those, you get 364. What? What's 364 cubits? The whole snake. That's about a football field and a half. Why 364? You know that number, right? Oh yeah, but you guys were off by a day and a quarter. We know the year is really 365.25. The best way to measure eclipse is by the number 364. Use the turtle. That's what Kunshi always said. You want to know the year in the calendar, listen to what the turtle says. So turtle has 13 parts, and the moon gets light on for 14 days and light off for 14 days. That's 28 times 13. That's 364. Then you got your Ampetu Tumpi Washte, your happy birthday. Tumpi Ampetu Washte, Tumpi Ampetu Washte. So that's your day 365. Okay, now that's the quick version, because if you continue that line where the sun and the moon cover each other every 18.61 years, or 18 years, or 19 years, you get an eclipse. And that very sacred connection, think about the stem and the bowl and the tranumpa. That's all the life. Every piece of chandi in there, the chanshasha. Those are the chanshasha stars too that's there. So, the whole story is here. There's the turtle, the snake, the salamanders, the wakian, the hehaka, the love medicine right there. And the sun is going through there now. So I've spoke too long. I apologize for your patience. Wopida tanka.
Rokahe Mitake.
Ah, wopida. I don't know how to follow any of that. And I don't know how much time we have. Jennifer, can you advise?
We have 13 more minutes.
Cosmic
number.
It was meant to be. We could just open. We could open to questions. I had other stuff to tell, but I don't know if there's time. And because I think there's going to be another session sponsored by the Institute for Advanced Study to continue discussing, to continue this conversation, and to talk about the book, that we can just open to questions, I think, maybe. Basically, everything that was said, there was so many themes. I'll just say this, in my thinking and in my writing and my practice as a teacher and a scholar, it all goes back, it all begins with listening to elders. And I think that to my Dakhóta elders, and I think that's one of the things I heard said over and over again by Midaku here. And I think, I wanted to share a funny clip. Maybe I could do that much. About or from one of my grandmas. It's a joke. Actually, it's from a couple of my grandmas who were gathered together and chatting. Yeah, thank you, Francis and Jim. So I'm reading the chat too. So people are sitting in the corner. Okay, the round corner. So there's so much in what I'm thinking about, you know, in the book that I wrote about, that's about, you know, I think Francis mentioned, you know, and Jim as well, a time when, you know, being Dakhóta, being Lakota was, and being indigenous was criminalized, right, in this country and in others, formally by law. To practice our life ways and our ceremonies was also targeted for elimination, right? And it wasn't until, like Jim said, 1978 with ERFA that changed a little bit, but still. So what I've been, you know, what in the stories that I heard from my relatives, you know, there was so much about, there was so much humor, there was so much joking and laughing and teasing, and I saw that, you know, that it came from this very, you know, joyous place, but also very pained place. And so that's why I was thinking about, you know, in this book, that's a lot about sort of camouflage, right, and how to protect these life ways and to keep our families and our communities alive, so much had to go underground and so much had to be sort of concealed, right, from surveillance. Right? And I think one of the ways to do that is jokes. So I wanted to share this joke, if I can figure out how, and leave maybe a few seconds for a question if anyone should have one. So let me find out where I am in my slides. This is one of Waŋblí Mayášleča's ledger arts. It's a really funny one because all these warriors are overtaking and counting coup on these scholars, anthropologists, and whatnot. All right, let's see. So this is these are my grandmas on my mom's side from Spirit Lake, from Fort Totten, and they dressed cooler than I ever will. And their names are Lydia over here, Lillian, Grace. We don't know who this guy is in the middle. If anyone can identify him, come forward, come forth. And my grandma Rachel, young. These are all youngs, and the stories that the clip I'm gonna share comes from Grandma Grace here, and it's a story about a place on the Spirit Lake Reservation that I always heard called Devil's Tooth. That was the Washichu or English language name, but it also was called Iyawatanka. And there's this story, and I'll see if this clip will, I don't know if the audio will come through, but I'll try because that's a lot of stuff to read. Let's do it. Can you hear that?
Huh?
Okay. Oh, I should say this is from like a long time ago. I was hanging out when my grandmas were still alive. So it's my mom and two grandmas here, and we're just hanging out in Grandma Grace's house in Fort Totten.
Oh, that's it's true though, you know. This one little old lady, you know, she came to the store and she bought a whole bunch of stuff. And the Indians honored the soul, which is no more than right because I was reading my Bible about the rock being God. You know, and they honored the rock as a kind of a god, you know.
I should have said too, a lot of my relatives are Catholics, converts. I'm myself a recovering Catholic, but they went through mission boarding schools. So that's one of those things I sort of struggle with in understanding how, because I knew what they went through in those schools, and they survived. But to go back late in life and convert to Catholicism, I always thought was unusual. It was hard for me to understand. So that's what a lot of my this writing and thinking is trying to do, is trying to understand that relationship.
And they made sacrifices. They offered their little offerings to it, and all that when they go there and pray. Well, this old lady came to the store and she bought a whole bunch of stuff, and she was going back and she was stuck by the devil's tooth, and I guess she bought a piece of red cloth, so she took it. That's what usually they use, is red cloth too, for all kind of sacred occasions, ceremonies. And here she covered a little rock with the red cherry, and then she took out her old worm, and they always use tobacco as a gift, So she took the old worm and she opened it up and took the other, and she says, Tugashina, Chadichi Jahi, she says, grandfather, I brought you tobacco as a gift, and she put it on the little red rock. It's in the back of the rock, my trunk was laying there. I'm sleeping, and he just woke up when she said, I'm good, grandfather, I brought you tobacco. He got it like, how? He said, down the road.
When I've been able to talk about this stuff, I always like to share that, because to hear their busting a gut at the end there is the reward.
Good to hear their voices laughing.
How?
The people laughing. They say Ias is afraid of sounds like that. That giant Ias. He's afraid of the sounds of life. So.
Huh. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to share that too, because I don't know, it means a lot to me personally, but I think it says a lot too about how we think about these places and how we think about our relationships to the land. It's not all deadly serious, and there can be a lot of joy in it, and a lot of mixing up of things, right? A lot of mixing of expectations and customs and traditions and whatnot. So yeah, so I don't know, we don't have much time, so maybe we can just talk together quickly in whatever time we have left. Jim just disappeared. His computer went, okay. The spirits took his computer from him in the end. Good. So questions?
I'll just remind you that you can use the reactions button. There's a little raise hand thing if you want to raise your hand, or if you want to type a question into the chat. And while you're typing, I will remind everybody, first I want to just say thank you so much on behalf of all of us to Francis and Jim and Chris. And I also want to say thank you to all of you for attending. And I'll put in a plug for reading Chris's book, Translated Nation, which if you're in the UMN system is an online access in the library. But, and if you use the online access, you will probably encourage the library to buy more copies. And if you want to buy your own copy, it's a great way to support independent bookstores. And let's see. Oh, and I just do want to remind you that this video will be posted on the IAS website probably sometime next week. It is all our videos are available from the menu bar on the far right end under the word video. And if you want to get on the IAS mailing list, there is a link online on our website to join, or you can send an email, which is good for questions as well, to ias@umn.edu. So I am seeing a lot of gratitude and thank yous in the chat, and I'm not actually seeing questions. Okay, and I'll read this aloud. It's in the chat, but if you are interested in continuing today's conversation, please join the IAS on Friday, March 19th at 10:30 a.m. for an informal reading group to discuss translated nation. And there's a Z link in the chat to sign up, but you can also find it on the IAS website. Chris, do you want the last word?
Sure. I just want to say to you all for coming, and especially to Francis and Jim for making it out or in this space today. And it was good, so good to see you again. It's been way too long.
Thank you so much for coming and for sharing. And we'll maybe see some of you next on Friday, March 19th for a book discussion. Many thanks.
Dakhóta.